Meeting to order at this time. We've got quite a lot to cover this morning, and we've got a big group I see here, which we're appreciative of. I'm going to, we are being recorded by the Minuteman Media Network, so speak into the microphones, if you will, so that it'll be picked up, and we'll probably also be rebroadcast at some point. At this point, I'm going to turn over to the meeting over to Alice Kaufman, Select Board Member, to introduce the consultant in our Town Manager Search Committee.
So thank you all for being here. I love this meeting. I said last night at one of our meetings that this meeting is the envy of every community in Massachusetts. So every year there's a conference of the Mass Municipal Associations, and all the select members come to this meeting. And I get to talk about this kind of approach where all the chairs get together and talk about what's happening in their communities. And we, every year, become the envy of Massachusetts communities. So thank you all for being here. I'm here to introduce Bob Mercier. We, as you know, we are beginning the search for a new town manager. After 28 years, we've had a long, good run with Chris. And it's going to be a really typical process for us to find someone who will fill his shoes. So the first step in this process is to reach out to the community and to ask you what you see as the key attributes or qualities that you'd like to see in the next town manager. And to help us through that process, we did a competitive bid process and hired Municipal Resources, Inc., and Bob Mercier is here from them to talk about the process a little bit, but really to get your input about what your vision is for the next Concord. And so, if you don't have questions, I'll turn it over to Bob, who's been here now many evenings.
This is getting very friendly. I was here last night, but yeah. Again, thank you, Alice, and thank you to the board for bringing on MRI. Just a little bit about MRI. We've been around. We're out of our base is in Meredith, New Hampshire. We do selective recruitments all over New England. The majority of them have been in New Hampshire and Massachusetts. In Massachusetts, our recent recruitments would be Lexington, Bedford, Acton, Hanover, and just a multitude of others. My personal experience is I'm a retired manager. I was a manager for the majority of my career in Burlington, Massachusetts. I was also the town manager in Billerica, and I served an interim stint over in Wayland, Massachusetts, and then I got to retire. And I retired out of Burlington. So my partner that'll be helping me here in Concord is Buzz Stapczynski. He's a retired manager out of Andover, Massachusetts, and he was a 25-year incumbent in Andover, Massachusetts. Prior to that, he was in Wilmington, and Buzz and I sort of grew up together. I was in Billerica at the time, and so we knew each other very, very well, and we continue that partnership today. So that's MRI, and that's me. So when we came aboard, again, thank you to Concord for having faith in us. We know you had a screening committee established, and we met with them. We've talked to Mike and Alice, and last night we met the full committee for the first time. We got some stuff done last night. We've got some scheduled meetings. And as Alice suggested, my role now is we're trying to develop a profile of the community. We're trying to develop what those challenges may be, because we want to get it all up on our website. The advertisement for the position itself will be February 3rd, and it runs 30 days. It'll be put in all of the usual suspects, Mass Municipal Association, our counterparts in New Hampshire, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Vermont, so all Maine, all of the New England states, and then we advertise in the International City Managers Association, which is the professional association of city and town managers. And that goes not only nationally, that's international. As a for instance, for our recruitments in Lexington, we got 23 states represented in the response. We got one foreign individual from a country outside of the states. We had very serious candidates from the West Coast, who ultimately decided not to make the move, but very serious candidates. And the typical candidate from the western part of the country or the middle of the country who looks at New England and coming back here is usually a transplant. Somebody who wants to come back to where they grew up, essentially. We had a very good candidate out of Washington State for the Lexington position. He ultimately decided that it wasn't the right time for him to move. He's in a very, really a nice community in Washington State, but has roots here and wanted to come back, but ultimately decided for a lot of family reasons that it wasn't the right opportunity. So the point is that you're going to get that type of person that will respond to the Concord advertisement. So as I said, the advertisement will run for 30 days, February through March. And by the way, we also put it in the Globe, and that puts it on to monster.com and all that stuff. So the problems we've seen with that, by the way, is that it's such a generic, you know, they select out the word manager, and you'll get somebody who's running a Walmart says, I know I can run Concord. And so, because it's just it spits out the resumes. And, so we go through that, and we explained that to the committee last night. We'll go through that. We have a database already of 1,500 plus or minus administrators, managers that we have kept in our file for all of the searches we've done. And again, you know, some people would say, well, if they're in your file, then they weren't hired. And that's true, except the communities only hire one. And if we present 3 finalists, if your committee presents 3 finalists to the select board, that second candidate may have been as good as the first, but just, you know how the dynamics work in interviews, the select board may feel this person is the best fit for us. Nothing wrong with the second candidate, but the best fit. So there are also good candidates if they haven't been hired yet, and they've stayed. And the people that will apply here are going to be selective. You know, you're not going to get the resumes being tossed out just because I need another job. People who are going to try to come here are going to be very selective, and are probably, for the most part, going to be gainfully employed. Some of whom may be in Massachusetts, and they know us, so they're very concerned about confidentiality. We mentioned this to the committee last night, because if they're going to be selective and they're not just throwing out resumes to go somewhere because they're not happy where they are, that's not going to be the case for the most part here.
What percent do you anticipate will have had experience in the type of government that Concord has, the sort of elected select board, but a strong town manager and open meeting?
I think you'll get, well, it's a little bit unique to New England and really unique to Massachusetts.
And I would think the rest of the country.
The rest of the country, unless they've, as I mentioned earlier, unless they've been involved here and then moved out and then can come back, it's not a new type of environment for them. They're pretty familiar with it. We've had some success in non-traditional candidates that have come here, and you know, the same type of reticence you just expressed. Massachusetts is a little different. You know, the whole home rule petitions and all that kind of stuff. People from county government, for instance, out in the Midwest, they don't quite understand how that works. It doesn't mean it can't be learned, but they don't quite understand how that works. But we have had success in sort of non-traditional people. I'll give you one example. We did Portsmouth, Rhode Island, and we've also done Ashland. Both those communities hired retired military. You wouldn't think that that would work well. It worked fantastically in Ashland, and it worked very well in Portsmouth. In fact, I was down there last week, and I met with the individual. He was a retired NATO commander. And I never thought that that would work, but the link there was interesting. Portsmouth, Rhode Island has a naval presence. So the appointing authority there, it's a city council down there, felt this would be a good match for us. So that's a non-traditional type of person. You can sit there and go, I don't know if that's going to work. And the commander in Ashland was a retired base commander, not from Hanscom, but another base. And you guys are familiar with the operation over there. Base commanders are generally city managers. They've got public works, they've got streets, they've got all that stuff that they deal with also. and they were very pleased with that. So those are non-traditional types. The more traditional types would be a manager from Long Meadow coming here. I get Massachusetts, I know how it works, I've got an open town meeting where I am, and all that kind of stuff. But it's not a roadblock.
If you would maybe just lay out the full timing of it, so advertising February 3rd, 30
Yep.
days, and then kind of from then on.
Okay. So we're in the process, as Alice suggested, of developing a community profile, which we post on our website. And what we have, and I'll talk about that, we have a separate website that we set up with links to it so that those candidates who are interested and respond to our ad, they go right to our website. And we have documents on the website that we get from you folks. We talked about this last night with your committee. We also put the community profile up there, and we're gonna work with the screening committee to develop that final community profile. We will do that over the next month, and Alice and I talked briefly this morning. Out of last night, we said that we would meet with the screening committee on the 24th of January, and hopefully to approve the whole community profile challenge statement. Here's some of the issues in Concord that we want the candidates to be aware of. But as my boss, Alan Gould, said last night to the committee, we want to give them substance, but we don't want to give them too much substance. We want the real serious candidates to do their homework on Concord. And you can find a lot of stuff about Concord if you just kind of put the work in. So we want to see that effort is there. We don't want to give them everything up front, so they're just repeating back to us what we've given them. So with that, we developed the profile and the challenge statement. We post that on our website. We'll give it back to you folks, obviously, and you can post it on your own website and all that kind of stuff. And then we post the ad in February. That's a 30-day period. During that period, we're developing a series of essay questions, and we do that with the screening committee. Typically, we do 5 questions. Generally, not generally, but really specifically towards Concord and what some of the issues may be in Concord. And we will pare down, MRI, will pare down the responses to hopefully, I think we said last night, 12 to 20 people that we think should be considered. We will talk to the screening committee about that. We will send out those essay questions to those candidates. Typically, we get a little pushback from some candidates who don't want to do the work. And when I say don't want to do the work, responding to 5 essay questions, typically in the past, Lexington, Bedford, we generally get 8 to 10 pages of responses back to us. People who elaborate on the question we asked. And it's very telling to us when people have done their homework, because the question is the question. But we want somebody to embellish. It's specific to Concord, and we'll know through their response that they've actually done some homework. On the other hand, we'll get 2-paragraph responses from some people. We're not real serious about those persons. So we'll come back, hopefully with the screening committee, to narrow it down to 10 or 12 people. We, MRI, myself, and Buzz, we do a joint conference call with those candidates we think we're interested in. And what we do with that is we really pick through their resume. Okay, you said from 2002 to 2010 you were in XYZ community. And then you went from 2011 to 2015. What happened? Why did you leave in 2010? Because they don't tell you on the resume. It may be something, it may not. It may be clean, it may be fine, I just needed a change, of blah, 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 blah. It's interesting because in that phone interview, and Buzz and I have been in the business, so we know when a person's telling us and they feel comfortable with us because we've been managers, and we can get answers like, you know why I left. The politics changed. You know, I didn't want to make a big issue out of it because then your career's over, because all you got to do is Google and you'll see the articles that say this manager was fired, you know, that type of stuff. So it's good insight that we get, and we come back to the committee and say, this person's terrific on paper, we wouldn't consider moving them for interviews, and here's why. Because we know them. So we come back with those, maybe 10, 12 folks, and we go over it with the committee. They get the resumes, they get the essay questions, they help us develop the essay questions, they get the responses, so they read all the same things we do. They don't get too involved themselves in phone interviews. And keep in mind, this is still all confidential. A lot of these folks, they just don't want their names out there, and I don't blame them. The task of the screening committee, we don't rank people. We don't think that's fair to the appointing authority. So we try to narrow it down to 6 people, could be more, that the screening committee will interview. We'll be there at all these interviews. We won't run them. In the case of the screening committee, Mike and his committee run the show. We'll prepare interview questions for them if they want. We'll be there so in the back so they don't ask questions that are inappropriate questions. We won't allow them to answer, and the candidates to answer. So that's the way we manage the process, but the screening committee has the process from now on, going forward. At the end of the day, we try to do a full day of those interviews. Could be a Tuesday, could be a Saturday, whatever it is, because keep in mind, some of these folks may be coming in from out of state. And we've got to talk to the screening committee about that if we get to that stage where their out of state is, because they may be coming out here twice. So we need to
Are we
keep that in mind.
talking kind of mid-April at this point, or what time in the
Yes,
calendar?
yeah, mid-April. We know Chris's, I have known Chris for years, by the way, so we know Chris's schedule. And we talked to the committee last night about that. They've got a lot of work to do. We're gonna help coach them through it, and as I went out last night with Alan, he's sending Mike some stuff today. They're gonna do a lot of work in terms of outreach, community outreach, which is part of this group, so that we can get a sense as to what you folks think makes sense in terms of who's going to replace Chris, and what are the characteristics that made Chris successful. Or maybe you wanna go in a different direction. We don't know that. It's not our choice, but we need as much input as we can get. We're gonna talk to key stakeholders. I am meeting with your department managers January 2nd, after the new year. I hope they're okay after the new year. So I'm gonna meet with them, and the same type of thing. I want their input as to what they think the next manager should be, the type of personal characteristics. From the technical aspects, we're not worried. You're gonna find people who technically can do the job, especially with a town that has a structure in place with very good department managers. It's really the manager portion that we're interested in, not necessarily the technical skill set, because people can do it. At the level you're talking, people we get to respond here are gonna be able to do it.
Do you look for, do you have an email address that you would be looking to have citizens who may not either feel comfortable or wanna come to meetings?
We do, and I'll give it to you also.
Right.
You can, in fact, I think we talked about it last night. It's gonna go out, in what you folks are gonna be doing. There's gonna be some outreach, and Alice can tell you about that the committee's going to be doing. We do have, as I said, we set up a Concord page, and we have an email, that people in the community, anybody can respond, can be anonymous. And we've had some folks, I know in Lexington we had the page set up, in Bedford we had. In Lexington, we probably had, I think I mentioned last time, maybe 15 responses to that. But it gives people an opportunity to comment on it, whatever they want to comment on. I mentioned last night, it was interesting, in Bedford, we had a groupthink email. Folks from a certain section in Bedford that were concerned about the flights at Hanston. All the same message to us. Find somebody who can deal with Massport. So we sort of knew what that issue was all about. So we'll provide the same thing for Concord. Folks can comment back. So if you have your pens, Concord TM recruitment, all one word. At mrigov.com. And you guys are gonna do some stuff with that, probably put it on the town's webpage and all that kind of stuff, so.
For those who had heard earlier, the town is getting an award for its webpage at the Mass Municipal Association as the best webpage for a town of, I think it's 15 to 50,000. So it shows that our webpage is pretty good.
Yeah, it's excellent. It's excellent. And like I said, when the information's out there about Sonic, anybody who's serious about this position can do their homework and do their research. The one caveat I want to say to you is that during this search, a lot of the actively engaged managers are going into what we affectionately call the health season, preparing budgets, going to town meetings if they have town meetings, if they're cities, if city, all that stuff. So we're cognizant of that. We know the schedules for most communities. So it could become an issue in terms of our scheduling with the committee about getting these people here and all that kind of stuff.
And the goal would be the selection sometime mid-May or?
Yeah, and ideally, as I mentioned, we go back to the screening committee and try to have them interview 6, we don't like it more than that, 6 folks in that single day. And at the end of the day, we talk with the committee about trying to narrow it down and come to a consensus on 3, potentially 4, not 2, to the select board, because we've done it before where the committee only wanted to move 2 and 1 withdrew because got another position, and that makes it difficult on the appointing authority when you only have 1 candidate. And we don't rank, and we advise the committee not to rank, because everybody we send to the appointing authority, we treat equally, and you folks make the decision what you think is the best fit.
Alice, do you want to add anything, or should we sort of open it up to questions?
Well, the only thing I would add is that we plan on holding a couple of public forums in January. We're looking into whether we can do an all town-wide mail drop with an invitation to attend these sessions and with an email address. We want this to be as inclusive and broad-based as possible. Not everybody's going to be interested in telling us what they have in mind for the next town manager, but those people that do have something in mind, we really want to hear. I think it's critical for this next stage to get the community input about what the ideal person to lead Concord looks like. And one of those key challenges, each of you represent, your committees that you are chairing. So what are the key challenges that need to be thought about going forward? Not the ones that are here today, but looking down the road for this person's tenure. What are the big issues? From my perspective, we've got a few big ones, but all of you have your expertise that you bring to the table that we want to hear about. And those are the kind of things that we will kind of work through in the public, in this community profile and in our public outreach sessions to hear, what resonates and what's important to you. It's a town-wide decision, really, because we're just helping to shepherd the process. So I think we can.
Why don't we, if we have questions, I would ask people to pull the mic near them so that it can be recorded and heard. Maybe identify yourself and your committee and fire away. You want to begin, Gary? I know you've got quite a lot.
Well, my name is Gary Kleiman. I'm the chair of the planning board, and I was also the planning board representative on the comprehensive long-range plan committee. I see you have a copy of the plan.
Yes.
Alice
was good enough to give that. I saw it online. I said, how am I going to read through this?
well, several of
Co-chair as well.
Yeah, I was co-chair of the committee, and several of the other members of the committee are here because often the chair of various departments were also on the committee. And when we completed that tome and presented it to the select board, we went over and gave them a top 10 list of issues out of all of the hundreds of recommendations that are in there, the 10 that we felt the select board specifically should be focusing on. And I'm going to give you a copy of that just because, given how closely the town manager works with the select board, they're the same issues that I think the town, skills that a prospective town manager ought to at least be able to get their head around. Because, so, it's not all of the recommendations in there, but I think it might be useful for you thinking about.
Thank you for summarizing. and by the way, on the in the profile, we'll also be listing the selectmen's goals and objectives for next year, all that kind of stuff. So whoever the candidate is kind of sees what the select board's looking for next year. This is longer range, which is good stuff.
Well, some of them are short-term also.
Okay, good.
2229 Main Street.
Oh, I see, yeah, I
The
saw that,
last
yeah.
one,
That's our Superfund.
we need a plan
Yeah, oh,
for
yeah,
that
yeah.
right away, so.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm Tom Tarpey, Chair of the Finance Committee. These questions really are my questions, not the Finance Committee's. I'm curious about your company database. You said you had 1,500, and I've got 3 or 4 questions. You can answer them as you see fit.
Okay.
What are the criteria for inclusion in your database? I think you at least inferred that people who got hired weren't included in the database. If that's the case, why is that the case? Do you automatically advertise or send out this notice of job application to all of the people on your database? And how often are successful applicants from your database?
Okay, in terms of the database and those who have come off the grouping, if you will, because they've been hired, we're reticent to go back after those people after we've placed them somewhere. We don't think that's a good idea for us as a professional search firm. So, because we work for other clients, obviously, other communities that wanted us to help them, so I don't think they want us to raid the person we got to them. So that's the reason for that. Second issue is, go back to it.
Well, the criteria is every applicant who you ever saw on your database, or do you only put the ones that get shortlisted?
Not only the shortlisted, but we include people in our database that have skill sets, but will not move forward in searches because they may be a fit at some point for a small town. That may be where they need to be. They wouldn't be moved forward in the Lexingtons or the Concords or the Bedfords. These are high-profile communities, but they may be okay for Blandford. So we keep them on the list. They're not the perfect candidates, but we keep them on the list because we also do some recruitments in small communities. Most of those being more in New Hampshire and Vermont. But it's interesting, just one example of somebody that we did pick off was the town manager in Shelburne, Vermont, right outside of Burlington. Nice community. The individual was a younger person, it's a male, got his start here in Massachusetts, went up to Shelburne to get his feet wet. It's a town manager spot. And we did not do that recruitment, but we knew of him because he was in another one of our recruitments, and he was on our list. And when we were doing Hanover, Massachusetts, we thought he might be interested because he's from that area. So we called him directly. He was on our original database, our listing, and we thought he had talent, real talent, and we called him, and he ultimately got the Hanover job. He came down here, his family relocated because that's where they're from. His wife was from that area, the South Shore, so they relocated, and I'm assuming they're very happy down in Hanover. But then he was kept on our database because we thought he was a talented individual. And I'm sorry I missed it.
Well, the last one was how frequently is a successful applicant somebody who had been on your database?
I think it's probably 50-50.
Pretty good.
You know, because we have some good, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of our people that remain on our list came in second. They're not bad people, they're not bad managers, it just wasn't the right fit. And some folks who are on our list and continue to be on our list, consistently, because Buzz and I have been Massachusetts managers for 30 plus years. We know a lot of these folks. We know a lot of the people who may be looking for that legacy position that we call positions like Concord or Lexington or Burlington. Those are legacy positions for managers. And we know of those individuals. They were not interested in places like Upton, which we did, but they certainly may be interested in coming to Concord or Lexington. So we call them directly. Unfortunately, what happens with a lot of the ones we already know about, that we know are good, their appointing authorities have bumped their wages up recently because it's a trend in Massachusetts. And Alice and Mike and the screening committee talked to us last night. A lot of good premium positions have become available lately. A lot of them. And a lot of those managers who we had our eyes on have moved. It doesn't mean there's not a group out there that will still move, but have moved around.
Anybody else that,
I'd be curious to hear whether Tom had thoughts about what the next town manager qualities you'd be looking for. I mean, they're really looking for input, not just questions. So if you have thoughts from your perspective of, I assume you want somebody who's fiscally minded.
Why would you need that, Tom? The finance committee runs that. I don't want anybody to question the finance committee.
No, we're looking for a really strong-minded empire builder.
Oh, that's what this is, right. I think the finance committee took that out of them.
We will definitely comment.
Thank you.
Bob, do you want to make a comment kind of from the school committee perspective?
Well, it's very interesting to see this whole process being presented to the public, and maybe this is one of your first meetings of a larger group. So we went through that same process a couple of years ago. So I'm comparing, steps that are being planned and so forth, and there's a lot of similarities. And I think the single most important thing is to have a lot of outreach opportunities, whether they're electronic or in meetings or whatever form they take. That to me is going to be important. And just as Tom mentioned, we will most certainly have a lot of input as to the kind of town manager that the school administration, Laurie Hunter and her staff, and the school committee would like to see. So we will definitely be
We
at
appreciate
some
that.
of the meetings and be in contact.
And we talked about that last night, and I'm going to do it direct to the superintendent.
Great. Good.
I think that's important, that I get a sense from the superintendent on a relationship issue, and, well, about that. Yeah.
It's vital.
Yeah, I agree.
We also, I want to say, in thinking through what firm we wanted to work with, we were somewhat modeling the school committee's approach because they did such an incredible outreach job.
Yeah.
And there were these stakeholder meetings, there were public interviews, there were meet and greets with the potential candidates. That process worked so well, we thought, with the hiring of a school superintendent, that we're trying to mimic as much as possible for this process.
Yes, please.
Hi, Nick Pappas. I'm currently on the Climate Action Advisory Board. And I think one of the things I want to talk about is the qualities of the town manager. And the thing that's always struck me is Chris Whalen's accessibility. No matter who you are in town, you can talk to Chris. And it's always been impressive that not only can you talk to him, but he'll know what you're talking about. Chris always has done his homework. He knows what's happening in town. And, Concord is the citizenry is very engaged. I'm not saying every citizen, but, there are several hundred at least who are, really engaged. And, it just wouldn't work for Concord, I think, to have someone who, as a town manager, who requires a lot of, screening, and he's, hard to get to and things like that. So I just think communication is real, and knowledge is really important in this role.
I think that's important for us to know. We sort of knew it because I know Chris, but we've got managers. To Tom's question earlier, we've got managers on our list that I know are sort of regimented. They get the job done. They're in some instances change agents, which I know you don't need here, but they're good managers. But what you're talking about, they would not fit. So.
Anybody else? Right there. Yes, there is.
Gordon Brockway, chair of the Light Plant, and I agree with Nick. I think that leadership is another place where Chris has really shined. And it's like not just waiting for town meeting to just point him in exactly in the right direction, but actually being a little bit out front. And I can say, having also previously worked on the Sustainable Energy Committee, there are a number of, over the course of, it'll be close to 10 years now, I saw Chris being out a little bit in front and thinking about where he wants to try and move us in terms of sustainability and climate resilience and climate change and so forth. And some of the ways that I saw that saw Chris accomplish things were in his strong support for community solar effort that actually required a good deal of communication and negotiation between, say, the climate committee and the light plant. And the light plant didn't like some of the aspects of putting up a lot of solar. That's sort of perceived as a loss of revenue and so forth. And so, you know, the light plant director works for Chris. And so there were some moments there where, you know, between the various parties that were trying to work this out, and this is not town meeting. This is not like citizen petitions or anything like that. This is actually leadership and thinking about the future and trying to sort of make things happen. So I really think that Chris had a vision that he accomplished with these activities and also with appointments. And, you know, I'm appointed to the light plant. I was appointed to the climate committee, the sustainable energy committee, I should say. And this is a role that Chris, you know, had personal responsibility for, and the net result. And actually, I think that probably, if I ask for a show of hands, a good number of the people in this room were appointed by Chris. And so, like, that's another way in which he was able to try and push the town or help the town accomplish what we're trying to do by getting the right people.
Again, important, leadership has a lot of different styles. I know what you're talking about and what Nick is talking about. That's the style that we know will fit. I mean, some leaders are leaders not by example, they just lead. Some do it in a more collaborative way, and that seems to me to be the way that the manager here would be successful. That doesn't mean, again, the other way to lead is wrong. It's just probably not the fit. This type of input is what we need so we can draft that profile. The worst thing for us and for our client, you folks, is to have somebody come here and fail. Then we haven't done the right job in terms of finding that fit.
I've always felt growth potential is one of the keys. I mean, you're going to get a person who probably is not going to be perfect their first year. They're going to need to learn about the community, about the people in the community, who they best communicate with, and how that all works. And so it's a personality issue as well as kind of skill issue comes into play.
Well, don't forget, from the appointing authority's perspective, you've been dealing with one leadership for 28 years, one style of leadership for 28 years. So the learning curve is for both of you,
Yeah,
whether the new manager is and the board itself,
yeah.
because you're dealing with a different personality. I know you know that, but
No, but that's important, I think, to keep on the front burner, that it's gonna be a learning for lots of people.
and the reason we say that is because of the recent ones we've done. I mean, Rick Reed was in Bedford for 30 years. So when we talked to the select board over there, we said, you know, the worst thing that could happen with your new manager is one of you comes in and says, that's not the way Rick would do it. Because that's tough for the person coming in. Carl Valenti was there for 13, 14 years. They had a certain expectation of their manager, the way Carl did it. We think we found good matches for both those communities, and the appointing authority got it. They knew that they also had to take a step back because things were going to be done differently.
Can I make a comment on, you know, it's really resonating with me what you said about collaborative leadership style, and I think, you know, can look at the superintendent of the schools and say, you know, look, we have an example of a process that resulted in a very collaborative leader that is working very well in terms of engagement with the public. But I think that for this particular candidate, I think you need to look at extending that collaborative leadership style to the town staff. You have, I heard somebody talking about empire builders. We have very strong department heads who have, in a sense, you know, created and our long-range plan goes towards trying to break down some of those silos, but we have very strong department heads And so I think somebody who can engage in a collaborative leadership style amongst departments to say, look, finance, we know you want to, toe the line on the budget. Look, planning, we know you have big ideas. We need to figure out how to make these things work together with what the schools need and what DPW is telling us. So somebody who's going to be able to work with the department heads and understand that change is inevitable and embrace that and work collaboratively towards solutions that work for the whole town.
It's funny you say that because, as I mentioned earlier, I'm having this meeting with the department managers on January 2nd. And these are very highly structured, well-developed communities that we could be dealing with. They have good people in place. If you're not good, you're not going to last in those communities, whether it's Lexington or Bedford or Berwick. Yeah. So those managers are in place. They're good managers. They are also going to have to get used to a different style of manager coming in.
Exactly. They've already had 28 years to establish
Correct.
their own way of working
Correct.
with each other,
Yeah.
and a new
Yeah.
manager is going to have to insert him or herself into a well-established framework of, I just leave that, it's his turf, I know better than to, and maybe that's not the right way of moving forward.
It's interesting because not the Lexington, but the Bedford manager, who's a new manager there, replacing a 30-year manager. We stay in contact. We follow up with the managers that we place because we want to make sure everything's okay from their end. And I also follow up with the appointing authority, making sure that how's it going? It's going well, and thankfully they've all said, yeah, it's going well. But I remember when her name's Sarah Stanton, the new manager over in Bedford. And I talked to her a couple of weeks ago, and I said, everything going okay? She says, everything's going fine. I said, you had your first department manager meeting? She says, oh yeah. She said, it was fine. I walked in, I said, who wants to go to lunch? They're like, wow. So, and she meant to look, I'm open, you want to talk? That type of stuff. So that's the type of thing I think we're also going to be looking for here, and I will reemphasize this discussion with the managers.
Anybody else?
I just
Yes.
kind of echo Gary's comments, but in addition to the department managers, there's a lot of boards and commissions, and people who have a lot to say.
If you could just identify your.
Oh, sorry, Peter Hunter, Chair of the Recreation Commission.
Okay.
I found Chris, similarly to be collaborative, and I typically come in and advocate. Well, we're saying X, Y, Z, and he said, well, you realize it has impacts on 5 or 6 different. Understanding, that and having compassion with the boards and commissions, not just the department heads, is important. He was great at understanding the personalities of different folks too. So this town manager is going to have to do a lot of homework.
That's a unique characteristic that is not inherent in everybody, because as I look at your structure, you have a lot of community committees and volunteer groups and people who really want to give back to the community, and you need to manage that. Otherwise, you can get overwhelmed by that, and your eye gets off the ball. That's important going forward with the community. So that's a skill set that not everybody has.
How often, this is Tom Tarpey from the Finance Committee, how often do you find that towns wind up hiring from within? In other words, someone who has been in the existing management structure. And do you find that there are any inherent advantages or problems with that?
It depends on the community. We have had internal candidates in some of the communities I mentioned. They go through the same process. We don't differentiate. They go through the same process that any other viable candidate would go through, including interviews with the screening committee if we had one set up. They did not get through that ultimate process before the appointing authority, but it was a process that was above board. Everybody who was engaged understood that they had to go through the very same process. There's no star on somebody's head that you move to the head of the line. You're treated like anybody else. And then ultimately, if they pass muster with not only us, but ultimately the screening committee, they will be before the appointing authority. And the appointing authority makes their decisions. like I said, in the communities around us, those internal candidates did not get to that stage. And again, that's not demeaning to those folks, they're very highly talented, but it's just, we had a good pool in those communities, very good pool. But it's not atypical that somebody internal would apply.
Anybody else want to ask a question? Or you all have now the email address, so if questions pop up into your mind, please send them along. We're very grateful for you coming this morning and laying out kind of the process and being able to get a little bit of a sense of sort of what this group's thoughts are. And Alice, do you have any kind of final words you'd like to impart?
I know she gave Mike a lot of work last night.
Very wise.
Yeah, I'm good at delegating. I think it's really important to hear your thoughts about what's important to your communities. You know, I look around and I know we've been working really hard on making our community accessible. We have walkability high on our list of, quality of town that we want. The Historical Commission is here because many people tell us that what's really important to Concord is our history and our historic character. We're just given a gift of White Pond, which is a swimming beach. And the White Pond, Committee is here to say, this is really important for us to develop a community-wide asset that works for the neighbors, that works for the town, and it's going to require some financial investment. And the library is undertaking a huge new project, a capital campaign project, to make a new children's library and a teen center. It's a big construction project, and so all of these committees are very actively engaged in what their area of expertise is. There's not, we are not without conflict at the Natural Resources Commission. We are in several pieces of litigation that are tricky. So we are not without conflict in this community, and I think it's important that these folks let us know what are the big issues that they're working on for their committees and what kind of qualities that are needed in the manager that will help resolve them.
Yeah, I agree. Every community has issues. There's no, and anybody who's a manager that will apply here has faced a myriad of issues. You're a little bit unique. You have your municipal light. And not a lot of communities have that. So that's a skill set, albeit it's professionally managed. I get it, but that's a responsibility that if you don't understand it, if you don't understand the operation, you may be at a disadvantage. So ideally, we'd like somebody who understands the operation of the municipal light. That's one of the unique things you have here. You also have a very strong charter, which a lot of folks who are interested here will look at it and say, that gives me some authority that I can move things around. And so you're fortunate in that regard. You'll get high quality managers.
Well, that's what we're looking for. So thank you. Normally what we do is go around and people talk about what their committees have been doing in the last month or so. We meet once a month. You're welcome to stay, but I'm sure you've got a busy...
That's terrific. She's right about that. I mean, I manage in Barica and Burlington. I was lucky to get committee heads chairs to talk to each other, and not universally, but they talk to each other, but not like this in a formal setting where you actually learn a lot about what's going on.
Absolutely.
There's no secrets.
Yeah. Well, and the cross-fertilization, I mean, one committee is doing something, but it does affect other committees.
I didn't know that. I can help you out with that.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, you're doing it right, and hopefully we do you right. Speaking of which, I'm going to be talking to the selectmen.
Great.
All of you, probably this week, after Christmas maybe, but I want your thoughts, obviously, on the type of qualities you think will mesh with the appointing authority. Because if that doesn't work, all bets are off.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for coming out. It's important for us to hear all this stuff, and we've got some work to do. I know, Alice, you've got some work to do.
You're welcome to stay and listen to the rest of this meeting.
I'm going to stay for a little while. I'll just get off the front stage here.
You may not have a very...
All right, I'll stay right here.
I think it's pretty crowded.
Well, of course, the time constraint, so.
Thanks. Peter Hunter, Chair of the Recreation Commission. It's been a busy fall and winter so far for the Recreation Commission. After school, before school programs are full up and running well. Winter sports are about to start. Basketball numbers are at record, which is a good thing for hopefully the program as a whole. Ski program is starting up in January. Have really good numbers there as well. The team at the Recreation Department, led by Ryan Kane, doing a great job. We had a very successful tree lighting on the 2nd of December. Hopefully many of you attended. In terms of other larger programs we're working on, the Giroux property, there was a survey put out about what to do with it, and in terms of its use. Hopefully everybody's completed those surveys. It's important to get town input. It's early stages on what we're going to do with Giroux, obviously. The Recreation Department has taken on the responsibility of managing and maintaining the White Pond. So we've got a budget. We've got a plan to open up, obviously, this coming season. And the Recreation Commission's all over it, doing a great job in understanding what resources are needed.
The role
what
was
facilities.
expanded fairly considerably with both Giroux and White Pond.
Yeah, their responsibilities have kind of tripled. They're up for the challenge, though. They've done a great job. I've been very impressed with Ryan and Anna and everybody. And speaking about other, Beatty Center has been in the middle of an improvement, I would say a turnaround, effort to really make that a much more accessible, user-friendly program. And I'm proud to say that we've made some significant progress with Andy Dutton, who's running it. He's really done a great job of recruiting and training folks. We had at our last commission meeting a couple of folks come in and just speak highly about how the transformation that's going on in terms of the friendliness and the receptivity of the trainers, the folks, the swim program. So we're excited. I mean, we're looking to improve the membership. Well, you have to improve the product before you improve the membership, and we're well underway in improving the product, and pretty excited about that. And lastly, we have Linda Escobedo as a select person liaison, which is great to have Linda to bounce things off during the commission meetings. So.
I think we're lucky as a town that Kate, the assistant town manager's background is in parks and recreation, so she's been able to really jump in very quickly with the Giroux and White Pond. So.
Yeah, she's been great, and she works really well with Ryan.
Yeah. Ryan's been terrific, so appreciate it. Why don't we start with you, and then we'll go around and end with Tom.
Gordon Brockway, Chair of the Municipal Light Plant. I guess one of the big things that we're going to be working on in 2019 is rolling out a time of use rate. It's going to take a number of steps to make that happen. First of which would be we're going to ask for commission a cost of service study. The purpose of the time of use rate is to lower our overall costs by better matching when people use electricity versus the times of day when electricity costs the least. I'll just tell you one other thing, which is I noticed that the survey results came in, and the light plant broadband service and electricity service were both rated as very good values, with a very, very small increase from like 14% to 15% of the people thinking that it's overpriced. Interestingly, we didn't actually change the price that much, but we did talk about raising the price.
Stop right there.
The sensitive group you do. Why don't we, thanks.
Yep, Nick Pappas, Climate Action Advisory Board. The board is new. It's only had, tonight will be its third meeting. The board came into existence out of a couple of bylaws that the town passed over the last few years that resulted in the appointment of a sustainability director. And the Climate Action Board has done a couple, so far, our first meetings, we were presented with a consultant's first pass at a greenhouse gas inventory. And the members of the board jumped right in at the first meeting with lots of engagement with the consultant about the methodology that was used and the quality and the numbers. And it was really impressive to see how much knowledge there is in the board. So that's great. We've got some subject matter expertise. Kate Hanley, the sustainability director's plan, hope is to have a plan fairly soon, a climate action plan. It's not clear when, there's no definite timetable for it. John Bolduc, who's a member of the board and has a sustainability position, I forget the exact title, in Cambridge, made a presentation at the last meeting where I was embarrassed to discover Cambridge is 20 years ahead of us in climate action planning with very aggressive goals. And so it's great to have John on the board, and we're looking forward to engaging. Thank you.
You might pass the mic along and,
I'm Doug Bacon. I'm a member of, not a chairman of the CHDC. Now that the Giroux land is available to us, we're working on that and what to do with the house there. And also working on the program we have that funds small home repairs for Concord residents, trying to fine tune that a little bit. That's pretty much it right now.
I'm Greg Higgins, Chair of the Natural Resources. We maintain a full agenda on twice a month. I don't think there's anything quite stand out right now, except we're starting to discuss the ramifications of a lot of the chemicals we use in town, and not in a regulatory way, but in an educational way to let the public know that there's been some rather vivid examples of chemicals that are called Roundup, a few others that are illegal at this point that we can't restrict because of they're authorized. But you know, what do we want to do as a town and know what the ramifications of those are? So we're sort of discussing that. And very importantly, and I mentioned it last time I was here, we're still looking for a member. We're fully staffed in terms of membership, but we have somebody that's been on there quite some time and has always winked at me that if we can find somebody, that'd be wonderful. Thank you.
Hi, Jean Goldsberry from the Commission on Disabilities. We are continuing our work on the lockbox issue, being able to provide lockboxes to people with disabilities who want those on their homes, and we're hoping to start to publicize that to the community in January. We've recently received several requests from community members, which is great to hear that, you know, people are coming to us with requests. We got a request to assist with providing some funding for an ASL interpreter for the human rights presentation that will happen in the early spring, I believe it is. And also an individual asking for some assistance in kind of educating a new business, which is the building is accessible, but there seems to be a lot of things that are stored along the pathway, and so it's not accessible for people to go into. So one of the things that I've been thinking about is we've got a number of new businesses in Concord Center and in West Concord, and maybe doing some outreach to the owners of those businesses just to help them understand and to be a support to businesses in making themselves accessible. We also received a request from the Acton Commission on Disabilities to work collaboratively on an accessible bike program. So I may be in touch with you once we get more information from them.
I know you've been working on the lockbox with the committee, the Council on Aging, and
Yes.
Their input, which has been helpful.
And they've been great. We've got a brand new representative from the Council on Aging coming to our meetings, and that's been really helpful and great in terms of communication back and forth. So, and I'm gonna have to leave.
Maybe if we push the mic over and.
Happy Gozer from the Agriculture Committee. We had our meeting last week and we are moving forward with our spring forum, which will be March 21st at the Harvey Wheeler Center. The subject is going to be on food and winter food preparation and how to get it and where to get it.
Right.
Ray Considine, Board of Health. It's been kind of quiet fall for the Board of Health, which is always a good thing when it comes to health issues. We had last night's meeting, we had Concord Provision in to explain how they will deal with underage sale of tobacco to children. They were run a sting operation, and they, that's what they're called.
But they're routine operations.
These are routine sting operations, yes. Much to their credit, this is really their first violation, actually their first violation. The issue of youth tobacco is really an important one, and we've seen combustible use of tobacco going down to about 5% of young people, but juuling and e-cigarettes with marijuana has increased, so that's a concern. And we also addressed that at the board meeting last night, what the board's role would be in looking at the use of electronic cigarettes, and that's something that will continue.
I know Emerson Hospital did a survey of the students, which was quite interesting.
Right, the Youth Risk Behavior Survey came out, and it really indicated the real spike in e-cigarette use, and particularly the juuling product, which is an e-cigarette. I know Concord Journal had a front page story and an editorial both on e-cigarettes recently. So that's an issue for the board, and we'll be tackling that.
And today there's a front page story in the New York Times about the limited options for treatment of teenage addiction to nicotine.
Right. And that also falls into the marijuana issue too, because a lot of the what they're called pods that you use in an e-cigarette or a Juul product can be not only nicotine but also can be marijuana. So oftentimes they're odorless, very hard to detect, and so we're seeing a real significant increase in that. And again, as I said, the board will be focusing on that issue in the new year.
Great, thank you.
Have you seen any ramifications from the opening of the new medical dispensary on Powder Mill Road in Acton? It's, less than a quarter mile from the Concord border?
So far, we haven't seen any implications for that. And I'm not sure what the opening date was, but
Month or so ago?
yeah, we haven't seen anything at this point.
I'm gonna actually, Gary, if you.
Well, just, planning board, I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to leave in 5 minutes, but we have a couple of PRDs before us, the same PRDs we've been looking at for a few months that are, showing some significant controversy over the benefits versus their intended, the purpose of a PRD is to preserve open space, and so the question is whether or not the benefits warrant the increase in density that comes with PRDs. So we're still looking at those, and then otherwise just the warrant articles, which are mostly housekeeping this year, the zoning warrant articles, with the exception of a formula business bylaw, which for Concord Center, expanding the West Concord cap for formula businesses to Concord Center.
Casey, you wanna
Thank you, John.
maybe move the mic?
Casey Winslow from, I'm the Chair of Public Works. And you may have all noticed that we have Cambridge Turnpike construction underway. Phase 1 has begun, and hopefully hasn't been too disruptive, but it's going to get worse. Phase 1 will continue. There will be a winter shutdown. It's a lot of infrastructure. And then phase 2 will include, which is going out to bid now, and that will include a couple of bridges, sidewalks. The end product is going to be a lot less flooding and hopefully a really nice road. But it's going to be through the year. 2019 will be all dealing with this. There will be some road closures. Some will go from, I mean, the beginning, it will start from, you know, Lexington Road to Hawthorne, and then they'll be further down, and maybe that'll open, and then it will be Hawthorne to Route 2, and then there will be at some point a complete closure, which will be directed through Lexington Road, yeah. Yeah, so it's a big project, but we've been only working on it for at least 10 years, so hopefully we're gonna start to see progress.
Only made a little bit more complicated with the gas line and the
Exactly,
strike,
so the infrastructure is the gas line, water line, a lot of infrastructure, which is really overdue. So it's good to get it done.
The gas issue, the strike is kind of, things are beyond our control.
Right, yeah.
We're hopeful
exactly.
that might get resolved, but that may be a factor in the length of time.
Yeah, exactly, but,
Get it done now.
Yeah.
My
Yeah.
hometown's Lawrence.
oh, boy, yeah, exactly.
Bob, you want to?
So, just the only other, oh, did you have a question?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry, the only other thing I wanted to mention was the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail intersection. A lot of people probably saw that disruption, and then like a sudden change. There was like, okay, it's getting there, and then all of a sudden, we weren't getting there, and we were going backwards. And that was a Department of Transportation issue, actually. You know, it's their kind of jurisdiction because of the rail trail. So we ended up helping them, but everything was reimbursed to us by the Department of Transportation. And it's pretty much so done now. The markings are temporary, but in the spring, when the weather conditions are better, there'll be permanent marking. So that was behind us.
And you also attended your last meeting, and the issue of conservation restriction on the property near Walden Woods was addressed.
Thank you for
And,
coming.
well, thank you for making very clear your position and the position of the committee.
Yeah,
It was very educational.
it's a tough one.
and
Of course, you know, the ideas and the genuine interest of conservation restriction is always admirable. But for the town, the Public Works Commission views it as an amazing resource, having that land that's, we own it, and there aren't that many tracts of land like that we own. And you never know what the future might hold. And so for us, you know, the operations that we have going there would be very disruptive to neighbors. And we don't have to, you know, we're with Route 2 as a buffer and the Walden Woods as the other buffer. It really is not impacting the neighborhood, you know. So that's just something that, you know, it always sounds really nice, but, you know, Public Works is really an operations. And so, you know, you gotta get the job done, and, you know, we'll see what happens with that article, but Public Works Commission, definitely our position on that is that, we really need to preserve that land for our needs in the future. So, thank
I
you.
might say that I was chair of the Public Works back when we kept the recycling of the brush and all the transfer stuff there. And it is very valuable to the town to have that there. I don't know where else one would go.
Exactly, that wouldn't impact a lot of neighbors and people and citizens.
I know we're really short on time, but if you have a chance, take a look at what they've done with the Bruce Rail Trail over in West Concord Village, adjacent to the Club Car Cafe, and
Yeah, that's the area that I was just referring to.
Yes,
that
and the commuter rail.
Yes.
There's a new fence now that blocks access for people trying to get to the platform.
Oh,
It runs for most of the distance between the bump-up platform and all the way to Junction Park. So it's just, it could be,
well,
it's
you know,
rough.
we had that unfortunate loss of life.
This is not exactly, that's not that issue.
No,
But it
okay.
does seem like you might need one more access point on near the platform, near the raised platform.
Okay.
Because the other
I
end,
will
there are 3 or 4
definitely bring
access
that
points.
to the committee,
Okay.
commission. I will absolutely bring that to the commission, so, good point, thank you.
Thank you. Bob?
Thanks. Robert Grom, School Committee. We had our last meeting of the year last night and passed several motions, mostly about warrant articles, 2 budgets, of course. The Concord school budget was 39,390,000, which is a 2.99% increase. Very, in my opinion, low based on the zero-based budgeting that we engaged for the first year this year. And the CCH budget was approved at $34,687,000, a 4.4% increase, meeting the FinCom guideline. We also passed two other motions, 4 articles, I should say. We were not invited into the MSBA, the Massachusetts School Building Authority pool of candidates, second year in a row.
This is for state funding for the middle school.
For any schools within the state, and there's just so much demand out there, you know, and there's some big projects in the near future, such as Lowell High School, that'll be north of $200 million, and it doesn't look very promising, you know, for our town. So we decided to approve a motion to ask for $1.5 million for a middle school feasibility study at this next town meeting. And the only other article of significance that we passed was a high school capital projects warrant article for access road parking, for access road paving and lighting, and a small parking lot, 104 spaces, and that will be around $2 million. And we realize all this is big news, and we have a very ambitious timetable to engage, you know, various parts of the town and residents in getting all this information out.
Being turned down for your second year does not preclude you from applying for a third year.
Not at all, and you know, that's obviously a possibility, but you know, we have to look at the intermediate term and determine, yeah, how likely will it be that we ever get MSBA funding. And those two schools are 40 years old, and there's, you know, every 2 or 3 weeks we have another problem, and the maintenance costs of keeping these buildings at Concord standards is a big number, especially year after year after year, and of course construction costs go up year after year after year. So it's a complicated discussion to have.
Well, thank you for bringing that to our attention. So.
Hi, Mark Hansen. I'm not the chair of the Pollinator Health Advisory Committee, but representing them. We're still getting started, I think, in our committee. The research we're doing keeps uncovering more issues. For example, this past month, we've been looking pretty hard at neonicotinoid pesticides as one of the issues that we approach. 2 things we found there. One was examining, Sig Bruce and I went into Massachusetts Department of Agriculture and examined the records of pesticide reports for the past year and found a wide variation in 2 very similar applications that I won't get into detail because it would probably reveal the applicators. But I think that to me it says that there's great opportunities for probably reductions if applicator A adopts applicator B's approach. The other thing we found was that a fungicide is also very dangerous for pollinators, both bumblebees and honeybees and other pollinators. And that fungicide is also being used heavily in different areas. So we'll approach that. The second thing I wanted to share with you is that we really see, probably should have started with this sort of a 3-phase approach to this problem. The problem with pollinators is the proportion of poisons that they get. The proportion has to be pretty small. For example, in honeybees, if the proportion is higher than about 3 parts per billion of the imidacloprid, which is a neonicotinoid, in the pollen that is fed to the larva, and this is a USDA study done out of Maryland, the larvae are more susceptible, significantly more susceptible to a disease called nosema. So the bee inspector comes by and says, oh, these bees died of nosema. Well, what really happened was they were severely weakened beforehand. So we're studying that. The 3-phase approach we see is to get that proportion down, to try to increase the number of pollinator-friendly plants planted in clean soil in Concord, and I think we have a lot of good opportunities there. I think recently Haywood Meadows has, for example, introduced more pollinator-friendly plants into that meadow. We both can do annual plants that homeowners can put in, and also shrubs and trees For example, linden trees or basswood trees are a great source for pollinators if they're planted on soil that's not poisoned. And then the third area, I think, which relates to all of this and why we're here is education. Talking to a lot of people around the state, we find a great interest in pollinator health and really not a lot of understanding about what to do.
Thank you very much.
A quick question. What is the half-life of some of these pesticides?
Oh, geez. In the case of imidacloprid, which is the most heavily used neonicotinoid, for example, the half-life is about 5 years. There was a study done in Britain by Bayer, the manufacturer, where they applied neonicotinoid-coated corn seed, which is a pretty standard technique. In fact, I would encourage everybody here to buy their corn from organic farms, as it's something you could do. But anyway, the corn seed level measured a year after planting was 10 parts per billion in the soil, 20 parts per billion the second year after planting, 30 the third year, built up to 50, and at which point, after the 5th year, at which point it plateaued. If you look at the statistics, the half-life of imidacloprid, which is after half of it decays, is about 2.5, 3 years. So it has a long life, and it is also water transportable. It's detected in the Missouri River, it's detected in the Mississippi River. I'm sure it's in the Sudbury River. Just a thought.
All right,
Hi, I'm Terry Ackerman, Chair of the Community Preservation Committee. And last night, we voted to recommend to town meeting a total of $1,811,419 of projects. This will include 12 different items, a total of $319,000 for community housing, $520,800 for historic preservation, $341,619 for open space, and $600,000 for recreation, $30,000 for administration. So the full project list will be on the warrant article and recommended to town meeting. We had a great team of people this year working with us. And I also want to mention that I know Bob Mercier and his colleague Buzz in the town has done a great thing to
I didn't know you were behind me.
And
That's it.
I've done it the whole time. Good job.
Thank you. Nia, do you?
Yeah. Susan Bates, representing Personnel Board. We haven't met since the last time you all met, but we will be meeting tonight, and I'm happy to say for the first time in several years, we have a full complement. We have 2 new members, both of whom have extensive HR experience, so we're thrilled.
Great.
Thanks.
Good morning, Nia Glenn, Historic Districts Commission. You'll remember from previously that we have been exploring expanding the Main Street Historic District. We had a public hearing, letters, phone calls, etc., to the area involved, the residents there. And I think we all feel that at this point, we do not have the necessary support. We don't want to go to town meeting and have it go down in flames. So at this point, we are not going to go ahead with our warrant for town meeting, and we're going to do more outreach. We think we need to do more effort on educating the public on the benefits of having more of the historic homes in the district. So that's one issue. The other thing was we had Verizon come before us on purely discussion basis, not a formal application, but to discuss the possibility of putting a cell tower monopole at Keyes Road. That was a very robust and lively discussion. I think the commission is open to hearing ideas on the subject, and hopefully we will see something that is more acceptable aesthetically. So we'll see where that goes in the future.
I know the citizens that were concerned about that issue were extremely appreciative of the committee hearing it, because it's somewhat outside of the normal process. You usually wait until there's an application. And excuse me, the one concern was an application is a fairly expensive process, and so they wanted kind of a little bit of a preliminary reading in terms of what would be necessary. And I think the community is going to be working with Verizon to try to come up with an alternative that might be successful. But I think the sort of attitude of the commission to reach out and to listen to the citizens really was extremely appreciated. So thank you for that.
Shocking, Pond Advisory Committee, we're delighted with the gift to the town. It's just going to be a wonderful resource for the town. We're made up or finalizing it tonight, the recommendations to the select board, issues that we know and are very familiar with, and hope that this can, with the town now in charge of really the whole surrounding area of the pond, because homeowners on the pond are under natural resource for 100 feet back, that they really can take a holistic approach to the pond.
So we're excited as well. So, why don't Carla.
Good morning. Carlin Reed, Chair of the PEG Access Advisory Committee. Give you a quick update of what we've been up to. We noted that the FCC comments were filed, the reply comments on PEG funding. Over 3,400 commenters filed in that FCC proceeding in the last 2 months, making it the second most prominent proceeding. I'll be monitoring it. We'll see what happens in that docket. Today in our committee meeting, which follows this meeting immediately, we will have a broadband update from our Hal, the Chief Information Officer, which I think will be fascinating, frankly. We're also working on our report to the Select Board, our PAC report, and in that report, which we'll be finalizing today, we will have recommendations to the Select Board on how to improve PEG access, the Town Runs Department, as well as other cable recommendations. We're working on 2 other additional projects. One will be looking at the results of the town resident survey. There were 2 PEG questions in that, dealing with, do you know about us, and what you watch, and if you don't know about us, what are your feelings about it? We're going to be considering a separate survey coming out, I believe will be in October. I've talked to the committee about that. That talked about PEG access and Comcast services. And the second thing we're going to be discussing today will be the warrant article for PEG funding. I don't know the dollar amount, I haven't heard it yet, but we're going to be forming a subcommittee to look at the budgeting for the PEG access fund, which I believe will be considered during the enterprise hearing. It's not an enterprise fund, it's a special revolving fund, but we'll be looking at the funding sources of that and looking at making recommendations on that. We're also going to be asking for quarterly reports of the income and expenses from the town manager's office, because that's what we're supposed to do. And I'll be sure to tell my committee members about the email address and about the 2 public forums. Just let us know when the dates are going to be held. So after this Chair's Breakfast meeting is over, we'll be having our meeting. You're welcome to stay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions?
I would only add that your committee, the level of expertise of volunteers is kind of extraordinary. So it's really been very helpful.
Not just the expertise, but the diligence with which they appeared. One is hovering in the doorway.
I was very late.
No. This is the Chair's Breakfast, so we'll follow it. We'll go back another 20 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I'm going to rotate through whoever's next.
I am Bill Herring, a very new member of the Board of Assessors. We've completed our rate classification. Mary brought that before the selectmen, and we'll move forward with the annual cycle.
Terrific.
Forward with.
No, it's always an excellent report by the committee about the assessments that went on and why the levels get to where they are and the level of growth in the community. So
The first thing I've learned on the committee is there's a lot to learn.
Yes.
They asked me to join, and I said I know enough that I don't know enough. So I'll look forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you. Melissa.
Hi, Hi, good morning. I'm Melissa Sallfield, and I'm here representing the Historical Commission. And I would just reiterate, because I'm pretty new, so even though I know a lot about the history of Concord, I don't know a lot about being on the commission. But the things we have been working on most recently, we've been evaluating the CPC applications for the historic preservation category. We've been obviously evaluating all the demolition delay bylaw applications. And we have been reviewing the terms of our own Concord's demolition delay bylaw. We've elicited information from a lot of the other communities in Massachusetts because we feel we need a little bit more teeth. And that obviously would ultimately mean going to town meeting. We're not anywhere near that. The other thing, we've been reviewing all the properties that have a preservation restriction on them to be certain that the terms are being followed. And in those, refer to the Colonel Barrett House, which is actually now National Park property, the West Concord Depot, which actually is a management issue between the town of Concord and the MBTA. Considerable work needs to be done there. I don't know if any of you have seen the depot. Certainly the exterior is in kind of deplorable condition, and we're very concerned about that. And then the church, that is former Swedenborgian church, there is a preservation restriction that has just been lifted because there was a sale on that property. So, thanks so much, and I obviously will give your email address to our committee members.
Thank you so much.
Are, as Alice said, we are very concerned that the new town manager have the same kind of concern of the unique qualities of this town.
Great, that'd be great. Thank you.
Whoever is next, if you just come forward.
John Soden, I'm here for the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail Committee. We've already reported on the redesign and reconstruction.
Department of Transportation.
Well, the engineer actually blew it, the design, and they've reimbursed us. Phase 2C, which is from the prison to Powder Mill Road, is in the final phase. Before they shut down for the winter, we're supposed to develop a punch list with the contractor to be completed in the spring, and then we'll have our grand opening. And to repeat myself, folks, the trail is still closed. Please do not use it. And I'm not going to wink. Phase 2B, which connects us from Acton to the prison. The major part of that is a bridge. We have the 75% design documents. We've solicited comments. We will have our final comments at our meeting the first Tuesday, which I think is the 4th or 3rd maybe, and submit that with the schedule. We hope to have a final design and bid documents so it can go out for bid for construction in 2019 with the completion date of 2022.
Progress is being made.
Are the design documents accessible online?
Yes, they are. On our,
Okay.
yeah, just go to our committee. They're there. There's one other thing, and now the senior moment is kicked in. Anyway,
Giroux land? That, because it's going through there, right, Giroux? The Giroux property?
Yes,
Yeah.
it's going along the edge of it,
Yeah,
and we've
right.
already seen some concept drawings of incorporating the trail with the recreation.
Like the park,
Yes,
potentially?
yes.
Yeah, nice.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. How do you?
Thank you. Morning, Todd Benjamin with the Affordable Housing Funding Committee. We've wrapped up our report, our preliminary reports to the select board, so we're kind of standing in the shadows on the sidelines, ready to offer assistance to get the town meeting, to town warrant as necessary. Our core recommendations are the annual budget line item, the real estate surcharge, transfer surcharge, the building permit surcharge, and the pilot. And I know the select board has some things that they're looking at in terms of adopting some or all or some of those things. The committee would also like to point out that I know there's been conversation about pilot in the past. We just want to make sure that the conversation of pilot that we're having is recognized as being different than what it was in the past. We are saying to look at these 6 wealthy institutions that are exempt from paying property taxes. In the past, I think the pilot approach has been much different than that. So our focus and our recommendation was just those 6 wealthy institutions, not all of the institutions in Concord.
Now, the select board on Monday night, we've got a couple of dates in early January and a Saturday, hoping that we can have a hearing that's devoted to the affordable housing issue, so that we really flush that out. So we're moving forward.
But again, well, certainly let us know how we can support any warrant articles and town meetings so we can move forward with this important issue.
Great, thank you. And last but not least.
Rick Eifler, Concord Housing Authority. Didn't do much to report. Our director's on 2-week vacation, which she's never done before. So the staff is holding down the fort. One heads up that might be of interest, there's a legislation in front of the state, the Ways and Means Committee right now, that may go through before town elections or may not. One of our members may turn into rather than elected member, may turn into an appointed member in the near future, or maybe not in the near future, depending on the legislature. But the tenant appointed member may become a select board appointment rather than an election. So things may be a little confusing at the town clerk's office this coming few months as we try to figure out whether there are going to be 1 or 2 elections.
Great. Thank you very much. And I want to thank everybody. Oh, Tom, I always
I will be extremely brief. The Finance, Tom Tarpey, Chair of the Finance Committee. The Finance Committee had completed its guideline process and came out with its recommendations, which were delivered to the various town budgeting entities. The numbers I'm going to give you, and all of the budgeting entities have now voted their budgets, and 2 out of 3 were not able to meet the guideline, and the Concord Carlisle Regional School Committee was able to meet the guideline. So the numbers I'm going to give you very quickly. The town had a guideline at 4.42%. And the town came back with a budget of, I believe it's 4.9.
That's what I
said. The Concord Public Schools had a guideline of 2.61% and came back with 2.99%. And CCRSD had a guideline of 4.44%, which they met. So that's, I can't, I don't have a weighted average of what that's going to look like, but I promise I'll give it to you next month.
Well, again, I want to thank everybody for attending. I think it's a very useful meeting. I apologize to the Pay Access Committee running into their time, but thank you all. Happy holidays.